morality prevail, all the other problems will start to just sort themselves out. You know, like if people were generally had strong morals and a high level of integrity, and that was reflected in the culture, and that was reflected in the messages you're getting from the media, and that was an obvious worldview to accept, well, then I don't think that we would be seeing mass shootings or, you know, these kinds of like murders and shit like that. Like there's a real the problem with those kinds of like violent situations is usually not so much the availability of guns, it's the hopelessness of the actors in the situation, you know. And this is supporting a right-wing position with a left-wing disposition, you know what I mean? That's more why I find it important to have a social safety net and to be making sure that we're raising our children properly. Yeah, no, the individual shootings too. I mean, this is a lot of like gangs and shit, like people who are living in hopelessness. I'd say ban pistols before AR-15s. Well, I like my pistol. You know, you can conceal one of those. How you gonna conceal an AR-15? You gotta show up. Whoa, the fucking trench coat. And what are the AR-15s inside of it? You looking like fucking Raphael when he went to from the Ninja Turtles, when he went to the fucking movies with that big trench coat on in the first one, you know? It's like, there's something fucking wrong with that guy. Bro, you can put your backpack over the coat. You don't gotta put it under the coat, you know? I just, you know, you gotta be able to carry. And we have something in America called conceal carry, which is a special permit that you can get that allows you to be able to conceal your pistol out in public. It don't have to be on your hip. And this is the concept of concealed carry. Do you carry it everywhere? No, I don't. No. No, I don't carry it everywhere right now. You know? But I'm not ruling that out in the future either. You know? The thing is, in 99% of countries on Earth, you don't need to carry a pistol because others don't have them. Yeah, well, that's why America's on top, brother. I understand your points. I don't support any kind of gun regulations that would take guns out of the hands of responsible gun owners. You know, I'm not some kind of crazy right winger. I'm just an American from Pennsylvania. You know what I'm saying? Besides the countries where you totally should. Yeah, and that could be true. You know what I mean? But here's the thing. If you don't need to carry a pistol, but you still have it and don't use it, then what's the difference? The problem comes in with people who shouldn't have firearms not respecting it. Not respecting the firearm, not respecting their responsibility to it, and not respecting just life generally. That's what I mean. Is there's a lot of people living in hopelessness. I think putting regulations on guns is just a band-aid over the bullet wound of addressing the hopelessness of certain youths and in certain areas in particular. You know? Because, you know, what are you going to have somebody take a machete? You know? If somebody gets on the bus with a machete, I'd want to have my gun. You know what I mean? Those kids use illegal guns anyway. Not always. Not always. But even still, if you outlawed guns, then how would you stop those incidents from happening if they're using the guns illegally anyway? You know what I mean? Like, the only way that would be effective is if you could gather up all the guns in the land and remove them from the land. That's not practical. Nobody buys a legal gun to do crime with. Right, but what ends up happening, because gun distributors don't sell their guns necessarily on the black market, You know, so like illegal guns are basically, they were legal guns at one time, and then they had the number shaved off to eliminate the deaths due to legal guns. No, I what I'm saying is that would get rid of the deaths due to legal guns, because let's say we were able to do it. We got all the guns in America and we got them out of America. And now suddenly we got a problem with machete deaths, shovel deaths. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to kill somebody, there's a million ways to kill somebody. You know, if you want to protect yourself, there's one way to make sure that you are equalized, and that is to carry a firearm. I ain't doing MMA, bro. You know what I'm saying? And hey, if that's working in Canada, that's, hey, power to you. I'm not going to argue for expanded gun rights in other countries, because that's their own culture. You know what I mean? That's up to you guys. Consent of the governed. You know? But the fact that we have guns here, I think that needs to be preserved and protected. You know what I mean? Because it's like you said, criminals are going to get guns anyway. They're going to get guns illegally. They're going to get illegal guns. Like, the problem isn't necessarily guns. The problem is crime. You know? But yeah, I don't see guns as a big problem in America. I think that guns get a lot of flack for basically our demoralized, shitty population's culture that we're steeped in, like fish in water. And there's a certain level of hopelessness that comes in extreme poverty. You know, I think that these problems could be solved in different ways. I don't think that we have to infringe on the Second Amendment to solve these problems. And hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we try all the other ways and it doesn't work. Well, if we try everything else and it doesn't work, then I would be up to discussing limitations. But we haven't even tried any of it. You know, there's been no concerted effort to address the hopelessness in the violent sects of America. We have a similar culture in Canada, but don't have the same amount of school shooters just because the guns aren't as readily available. Yeah, I personally, I think a lot of the school shootings in America is being provoked by intelligence operatives. Guns aren't the problem. The dystopia hellhole with the blind leading the blindest. I'm more in accord with that there, Mantis Toboggan Schmurder. That's more what I'm looking at. I think, and here comes conspiracy. I think that there is a very fervent war being fought in the shadows by competing intelligence agencies over being able to influence American culture. And a useful tool for that is school shootings. Okay? Now, here's an interesting thing. How many school shootings were there during the Biden administration? During Trump's first term, there was fucking every week a new school shooting. Every week. Why? The social engineers were trying to turn the temperature up to make you fucking mad. Get you fucking pissed off to vote this guy out. Right? And then once Biden got in office, it vanished. Why? What happened? Kids ain't upset no more? What happened? You know what I mean? Just like the thing in Minnesota. They had all these protesters out there protesting ICE and shit like that. You know? And then after, Trump made a deal or made a call to Minnesota, and then he sent Tom Homan over, and what happened? Like, a switch had been hit. Suddenly, there was no protesters. You know what I mean? Like, these are all illusions meant to, careful what's his face, you remember Alex Jones? I think a lot of these things are illusions to manipulate public perception in a particular direction. And I think it behooves the cultural engineers to disarm our populace. I don't know why. I don't really understand why. But I can kind of see these forces moving in congruence. And does that make me crazy? I never said I wasn't crazy. All I said was that I feel like I'm a good person. I could be a little crazy. You know, there are things that I suppose about what's going on that I can't argue for or against, but I got my eyes on it, and I'm always looking for more information to help contextualize it. You know, but I don't know. Are our cultures similar? Is America and Canada really that similar? How similar are we? Because you guys got two halves, right? You got the British side and the French side. You know, you can't escape the influence of culture. You know, the culture you grow up in is like the water that you swim in as a fish. You know, it's just all around you, all encompassing, and very hard to tell that there's even something there. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you talking about this culture, man? Overall, we're pretty similar, just less religious and with less guns. Okay, that's interesting. I'll tell you, bro. I really like Trailer Park Boys. I didn't really fuck with Letterkenny that much. Razor, what's up, man? Thanks for the follow. Welcome to the chat. What's up? Just discussing a little bit about the similarities or differences between American and Canadian culture, and talking about how that relates to gun ownership and gun rights. What are we talking about? Well, that's that. We've had a long conversation, but that's pretty much where we're at right now, is discussing what kind of restrictions there could be on gun rights that would make sense in America based on statistics, or should there be no restrictions? And where is the nuance in that? How do you argue it? Because it's not really the well-regulated militia against the government kind of thing isn't the strongest argument anymore, but yeah, Trailer Park Boys was one of my favorites, but they fell off. It became kind of sad to watch, so I stopped watching it. Yes, I agree with that. That one season, the season before the last season with Leahy, when they had Doug Benson and Snoop Dogg on, that was just like somebody gave them a bunch of money to do a bunch of guest spots. Like, it fell off hard that season. But man, the first 4 or 5 seasons were just too fucking funny. I think season 2 is best. Season 2's, it's so good, bro. We were actually just watching Trailer Park Boys. I'm in a Discord with some of my boys, and you know, they hadn't seen it. I was like, dude, so I fucking just put it right on from the beginning. I had that season on my iPod. That was a good one. That was a good season, bro. I fuck with that show. I like the boys. Actually, Randy Bobandy is coming to my town. He's doing he goes on tour, and so he's doing Randy's Cheeseburger Picnic over in Stroudsburg, which is about 45 minutes from me or so. Yeah, that's I like the Trailer Park Boys. Hey, Razor, did I say your name right, bro? Ray Wanzer? I was just kind of using the most letters to make sense out of it. What do you think, Razor? What's your opinions, bro? What brought you here? When I said politics, let's talk, and you were like, let's get into it. I like a good discussion. This has been great. You know, I like to hear different points of view too. It's not, you know, I know some people get bothered by it. I like that. Variety's the spice of life, bro. I think it's beautiful that everybody think for themselves and develop their own perspective. I like that. That's great. I believe it is natural for problems to spread in America because the law protects those fools who find a good lawyer who can manipulate the law. So that's actually the problem. I like that, bro. Lawyers drive this country. And it's kind of fucked up because you're right.